I was rolling dough in the kitchen when the house gave me its answer. "Sweetheart, use Mom's card. She's got about $130,000 on it," my son said from the living room. The rolling pin slipped, struck the counter, and the sound went through me like a gavel. Flour drifted up in a soft cloud, and for a heartbeat, the refrigerator hummed, the only steady thing in the room. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. At my age, I don't shout. I keep receipts. Edward. My boy who used to sleep with his fist curled under his cheek. My man who promised, 20 years ago, "It's a loan, Mom. 2 years and I'll pay you back." The same mouth now gave my card to his wife, as if he were sharing a slice of cake. Grace's voice floated in, sweet enough to rot a tooth. "Are you sure, darling? She won't get mad?" "She lives here for free," he said. "It's the least she can do. Free." I pressed both palms into the dough so I wouldn't shake. Free meant my $500 pension, handed over every month. Free meant meals cooked, clothes washed, rooms scrubbed. Free meant a mother's labor renamed gratitude, so nobody had to count it. They called me simple. Simple doesn't mean blind. Grace's purse jingled. Keys, lip balm, the tiny clatter of entitlement. And then her heels clicked toward the door. She called into the kitchen like I was the help. "Need anything, Josephine?" I kept my back turned so she wouldn't see my face rearranging itself into a new truth. "No, dear," I said. And the word dear tasted like copper. When the door closed and the car eased away, I sat. I'm 68. My hands are veined maps of every house I cleaned and every seam I stitched. I have saved since I was 14. Rice and beans years, bus rides with sore knees, Sunday shifts that were supposed to be rest. 40 years braided into $130,000. Not a fortune, no, just a door I could finally open by myself. I looked at the narrow room down the hall that Edward calls cozy. It used to be a pantry. The big walk-in belongs to Grace. The office is his. The sofa is hers. The armchair near the window is the only square of space they allow me to wear like a name tag. When did my life shrink to a chair? In the living room, he was still talking. The familiar cadence of a man who has convinced himself that taking is helping. "We have expenses. We have a life," he said. And I do not, I thought. I have a life. I just set it down for him and forgot where I left it. I stood, wiped the flour from my palms, and opened the drawer where I keep the small folder. Bank papers, account numbers, a photocopy of my ID. A woman like me learns to carry her proof in paper, not in hope. I took the folder to my little room, closed the door softly, and dialed a number I knew better than prayer. The line began to ring, and I pressed the phone to my ear like a match to kindling. "National Bank, good morning. This is Linda. How may I help you?" Her voice was steady, the way a bridge must be when the river below is full and fast. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, folder open, the paper smell of ink and dust lifting into the air. "Yes, Linda," I said. "I need to block my debit card immediately." "Of course, ma'am. Did you lose it, or was it stolen?" I gave the truth an address it could wear in public. "Someone has it without my permission. Names, date of birth, address." She asked the questions like a metronome. I answered without shaking. I could feel my heart in my wrists, but my voice was clean. The window let in a square of noon light that fell across the folder, account number highlighted in yellow, the way I'd taught myself to do after the first time I lost an envelope and cried all afternoon. "Thank you, Mrs. Josephine," she said. "Your card is now blocked. Timestamp 11:25 a.m. No transactions can be processed. No one can spend my life today," I thought. "Please don't mail a new card here," I added. "I'll pick it up at the branch next week." Noted. "Anything else I can do for you?" "You've done enough," I said, and my hands, finally, stopped trembling. I hung up. The room was small, but the air felt wider. I rested the phone on the folder the way you put a lid on a pot, to keep something precious from escaping. In the kitchen, a pot simmered. I had left the dough rising, and the smell of yeast and memory filled the hallway. "Lunch ready, Mom?" Edward called, breezing in like a man certain of the weather. "I've got a meeting at 3. "Almost," I said, smoothing my apron. I went back to the counter, punched the dough down with more force than the recipe required, and shaped it with slow, deliberate hands. He leaned on the refrigerator scrolling, the glow of his phone on his face like a small, smug moon. "Grace went to the mall," he said, as if narrating a nature documentary. "We needed a few things for the house." I pinched the seam of the loaf closed. "Did you hear me?" His tone sharpened, the way it does when a servant forgets her line. "Yes," I said, and slid the bread into the oven. The first call came as the timer hit 5 minutes, a distant, tinny panic bursting from his speaker. "What do you mean it's declined?" Grace's voice crackled, sugar burned black. "Run it again." Another pause, then louder. "Again." Edward straightened. "That's impossible," he said, already walking out. "My mom never, she doesn't even, hold on." His footsteps returned to my door. 3 quick knocks, like he was still a boy who'd broken a lamp. "Mom, did you block your card?" I wiped my hands on the towel, opened the door, and let him see my face. Calm as a ledger. He waited for the old woman who would apologize. "Yes," I said. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Somewhere, the oven ticked, counting down a life that was no longer on loan. "Grace is at the register with $82,000 in purchases," he managed, color rising. "They're calling the manager." I adjusted the timer by 1 minute, then looked up at him, my son, and not. "Tell Grace to come home," I said softly. "The 3 of us need to talk." The doorbell rang before he could answer, and the sound threaded the house like a warning. The doorbell kept chiming like a stubborn memory. I left Edward standing there, his phone buzzing with Grace's fury, and went back to the kitchen to turn off the oven. The bread had risen proud and brown, the way things do when you leave them alone to become themselves. I set it on the rack to cool. Steam rose, soft, honest. I have learned that hurt doesn't start when the words are spoken. It starts years earlier, the first time you are told to stand in a smaller corner, and you obey. My hurt began the day I sold my 2-bedroom walk-up, the one with the lemon tree and a chipped pot on the balcony. "It's a loan, Mom," Edward said, eyes shining like coins. 2 years, I swear. 2 years became 5, then 10, then a habit we stopped naming. When a promise is never revisited, it grows mold in the dark. I used to keep the cashier's check stub in a Bible, between Psalms and Proverbs. Money and wisdom pressed together like a joke I didn't get yet. I'd touch it sometimes, not to accuse him in my mind, but to remind myself I had once owned a door only I could open. A door is a spiritual thing. You don't realize it until someone calls your home ours and your room cozy. In the pantry room I sleep in now, there's a scuff on the baseboard where the shelving used to be. Sometimes I run my toe along it in the night. It keeps time better than a clock. It says, "You are in the place you paid for and somehow do not own." It says, "Love without boundaries is a lease in someone else's name." Grace used to bring her friends over on Sundays. "This is Josephine," she'd say, smiling like a realtor showing off crown molding. "She helps around the house." I would serve her sister's children pancakes and keep my face calm when little hands dropped syrup on the rug. I'd wash the plate nobody thanked me for. I would go to my chair, the 1 square of allowance, and breathe through it. Mothers make oceans out of teaspoons. We shouldn't have to, but we do. In the early mornings when they were still sleeping, I'd count my savings like prayer beads. $20 here from hemming Mrs. Vega's curtains. 50 there from scrubbing tile on my knees at the Rodriguez place. I stacked memory the way other people stack books, careful not to topple what kept me upright. $130,000 wasn't about greed. It was about the smell of my own coffee in my own kitchen, about waking up and not waiting for footsteps to decide my day. Edward knocked again, gentler this time. "Mom?" I wiped the last of the flour from the counter and looked at the small folder on the table. Plastic, cracked at one corner, my handwriting across the front. House, down payment. I had labeled it 20 years ago, thinking it would be an artifact of a brief, generous season. The doorbell rang once more, impatient now, dragging the present into the room. I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. At my age, I don't shout. I keep receipts. I opened to the page with his promise and laid my finger on the date, the ink still a little ruthless after all these years. Grace swept in on a wind of perfume and humiliation. Her heels clicked like punctuation, and the shopping bags, empty now, swung from her wrist as props. "Do you know what you've done?" she said, not to me but to the air, which she assumed worked for her. Edward stood behind her, color high, shoulders tight. "Mom blocked the card," he said, failing at calm. "We just need to sort it out." I had set the bread on a cutting board and the folder on the coffee table, exactly where a family keeps magazines they plan to read. The living room looked like it always does, their sofa like a continent, my armchair like an island that learned to survive alone. Grace planted herself in the center of the room, still in that sugar-burned voice. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone, Josephine. The manager had to come. 20 people watched. Do you understand?" "I do," I said, because I did. I had been watched for years without anyone seeing me. She turned to Edward. "Make her call the bank, now." I sat. I let my body choose slow. "Before we fix anything, we're going to read," I said, tapping the folder. "Start here." Grace blinked, thrown by the verb. Edward frowned, already bristling. I opened the plastic and slid out the photocopy of the cashier's check. $50,000, drawn 20 years ago, my handwriting on the memo line. Down payment loan to Edward. Repay within 24 months. Underneath lay a printout of the bank transfer receipt, 8 emails I'd printed before printers went out of fashion. Each one the soft landing of a promise. Soon, Mom. After the raise. Next summer. Then silence. Grace tried to laugh. "So what? She lives here. We feed her. That's repayment." I kept my gaze on Edward. 2 years, I said. You said it would take 2. He looked at the paper the way a man looks at an old mirror, not at the glass, but at what refuses to be avoided. His mouth worked around a justification. I could almost hear the gears. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, life. "We have expenses," he said. "I know," I said softly. So did I. Grace snatched for the folder. I placed my hand on it. The room narrowed to the square of table between us. "This is not a courtroom," she said, laughing too loud. "You're not a judge, Josephine." "I'm not," I agreed. "I'm a mother, and I am done underwriting the kind of love that charges interest." Edward sat. He didn't take the paper. He looked at the date instead, like a man counting backward to find where he made the wrong turn. His shoulders slumped, just a fraction. That was new. That was a hairline crack in a wall I'd been pressing all my weight against. Grace didn't notice the crack. She talked faster, cataloging the TV, the sofa, the refrigerator noises, her evidence that I owed the house money for my existence. She didn't understand that a woman can pay in everything and still be told it wasn't currency. I reached into my pocket and touched metal. The spare key to their door I'd kept on a ring with my grocery fob. I felt its teeth. A key knows what it opens and what it doesn't. "Here is what will happen," I said, voice level. "We will not charge anything to my account. Not today, not ever. I will not argue about groceries, electricity, or the price of my breathing in this house. And you," I looked at my son, not his wife, "will read what you signed your life around and decide if your word has a clock." Grace scoffed. Edward stayed quiet. Outside, a siren wailed down the block and faded, like trouble passing someone else's door. I slipped the key from my pocket and placed it next to the folder, teeth glinting between paper and wood. Neither of them reached for it, but both of them stared, as if they could already hear the sound of a door they didn't control closing. That afternoon wore the same face for hours, a gray light over the dining table, the folder like a lighthouse, my son's silence circling it. Grace shifted to numbers, a language she thought would bury me. "Mortgage is $1,200, she said, tapping her phone. "Utilities $300, groceries $5, internet, phones, insurance. Do the math, Josephine. Your $500 pension barely feeds you." "I eat what I cook," I said, "and the stove likes my hands." I could feel the old habit of apologizing rise like heat, and I refused it. At my age, I do not apologize for existing. Grace's mouth tightened. "Fine. Then here's the math that matters. We can't cover this month's card bills without that purchase. I put down deposits assuming your card would go through. If we don't pay, we wreck our credit. We could lose the house. There it was. The house as hostage, morality in foreclosure. I kept my gaze even. I didn't create your debt, I said. I won't finance your solution. She turned to Edward. Say something. He rubbed his temple like a man reading fine print on his own soul. Mom, he tried. Maybe just this once. We'll set rules after. We're underwater. I laid a palm on the folder. We are underwater, I said softly, because you drilled a hole in the boat and called it love. A new tactic landed. Casual, almost kind. Then at least help by signing this, Grace said, sliding a printed page from her tote. It's a simple authorization so we can speak to the bank on your behalf. Saves you trouble. You hate those calls. The paper smelled like fresh toner and old trouble. I read the title, Third-Party Authorization, and below it, a line for my signature. Farther down, a box for full access. I set it back on the table as if it were hot. No. Grace laughed through her nose. You don't even understand it. I understand it perfectly, I said. What I don't understand is why you keep confusing convenience with consent. Her eyes sharpened. Edward, she's being unreasonable. This is why families put elders' finances in order. Before mistakes happen. Elder. Mistakes. The words arranged themselves into a neat little trap. I saw the road. A whisper to a neighbor. A suggestion to a doctor. A nudge that I was forgetful. A kindly visit from someone who would say guardian in a tone like a lullaby. I breathed in, steady. I have made mistakes. None of them required a witness. I stood and went to my room. The hallway narrowed to a string stretched tight. I took my small suitcase down from the closet shelf and set it on the bed, the zipper teeth meeting with a soft, stubborn sound. Photographs, papers, the jewelry box with my mother's ring. I packed them carefully, the way you fold a life without creasing it beyond repair. From the doorway, Edward watched like a boy at the wrong movie. You're leaving? Soon, I said. Not because I am angry, because I am done. I'll look terrible to the family if you go, he said, creating a cost where a choice already lived. Grace's parents are coming next week. What am I supposed to tell them? The truth, I said, that I learned to choose myself without apology. I placed the folder on top of the clothes and closed the case. The room exhaled. I slid the suitcase under the bed, handle out, a door with its hand already on the knob. They tried sweetness first. The next morning, Grace cooked a performance. Pancakes high as a promise, strawberries fanned like roses, syrup warmed on the stove. Sit, Josephine, she sang, apron tied in a bow. Let's start fresh. I sat because I am polite, not because I am fooled. Edward hovered with a gentler face, the one he wears for company and holidays. We were harsh, he said. We're sorry. Grace's sorry came plated with conditions. Of course, we'll keep your money safe. We can move it into a joint household account so everyone contributes fairly. Transparent. Adult. I cut a small corner of pancake, tasted the butter, and set my fork down. Joint means yours, I said. Fair means you decide. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope, a photocopy of the loan stub, the dates, a summary I had typed on Linda's old typewriter years ago, letters slightly bent where the ribbon skipped. I slid it to Edward. Read it without Grace in the room. Grace laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. She stood, scraping her chair back like a reprimand, and stalked down the hall. The room settled. Edward glanced at the kitchen doorway, then at the paper, then at me. You kept all this? At my age, I don't shout, I said. I keep receipts. He read. The muscles along his jaw worked. I remember the promise. I also remember how tight things were. I told myself you understood. I did, I said, until I didn't. Grace reappeared carrying a glossy brochure, a bright yellow sticky note fluttering on the cover. Or, she said, sugar hardened to candy glass, we could make this official. Look. She spread the papers, a family contribution agreement downloaded from some corner of the internet, blanks filled in with my name in her careful schoolgirl print. A line committed me to $1,000 a month toward shared household costs and authorized automatic transfers until further notice. Further notice is a kind of forever. No, I said. She smiled with all her teeth. We'll notarize it, she said. It'll protect everyone. Everyone is not what you mean, I said. Edward rubbed his eyes. Grace, stop. This isn't helping. She leaned over him, hand on his shoulder, a picture of unity. We're just trying to keep us afloat, she whispered, but loud enough for me to hear. You know your mother gets confused with paperwork. This is cleaner. I tucked the envelope back into my pocket. I am not confused, I said. I am clear. Clear is inconvenient to people who prefer fog. The bell rang. Twice. Then a third time. Insistent. Grace glanced at her phone. Good. Right on time. She went to the door and returned with a woman in a navy blazer, carrying a leather portfolio. This is Carla, Grace chirped. She's a financial planner, a friend. She'll help us sort this. Carla's handshake was confident, eyes scanning the room for the person who held the most power. When they landed on me and did not move, she sat across from me and smiled. Mrs. Josephine, we're just here to make sure you're safe. Safe. That soft word again. Wearing hard shoes. I folded my hands. Then the safest place for my money is with me, I said. Carla opened the portfolio. Forms, lines, checkboxes that look like choices and behave like cages. Let's review your assets together, she said. No pressure. Edward's eyes met mine, a flicker of something ashamed, or afraid, or both. Grace poured more coffee like a seal on a contract. I reached into my apron pocket, found the small ring of keys, felt the one that wasn't theirs. A different door, a different life. Before we start, I said, standing slow as scripture, I need to get something from my room. I closed the door behind me and slid the bolt. A soft click that sounded, in my ears, like a pen crossing out a line I should never have signed. I slid the bolt and stood with my back against the door until my breathing matched the slow tick of the bedside clock. In the mirror, a woman I recognized waited for instruction. Don't shake. Don't rush. Don't beg. I took the small suitcase from beneath the bed and placed it on the spread. Inside, photographs that remember me when I forget. My mother's ring, the small wooden box with a hair ribbon that once belonged to a little boy who asked for monsters to be checked under the bed. I pressed my palm flat on the folder, the thin spine of my story, then carried it back to the living room. Carla had rearranged the coffee table into a stage, forms fanned like glossy feathers, a pen laid diagonally in a way that said, "We've made this easy for you." Grace had poured coffee I didn't want. Edward sat forward, elbows on knees, like a man who wants out of a room he furnished himself. "Mrs. Josephine," Carla said, warm as a waiting room. "I understand you value independence. So do we. A simple power of attorney gives your son the ability to help only when necessary. It's protection, not control. Protection is the prettiest word a cage can wear." I set my folder on the table and did not open it. "No." Grace's smile cooled. "Then just sign the bank authorization so we can pay the deposits I already placed. They'll cancel by 5. "Then cancel them," I said. "That is what cancel means." Edward flinched. "Mom, please." I looked at my son, not the planner, not the wife. "You are asking me to pay for a life that isn't mine," I said. "I have already paid for walls that do not belong to me, for a chair that does, and for the silence that keeps your marriage from hearing itself." Carla folded her hands. "If you refuse, I'm obligated to advise your family about next steps for your safety. Guardianship is for people who cannot decide," I said. "I am deciding." Something hard flickered in Grace's eyes. She reached toward the folder, casual, like a woman moving a magazine to set down a cup. Her fingers slid beneath the top cover. "Let me put these old papers somewhere safe so we don't spill." I placed my hand on the folder. She kept hers there too. Our hands looked like a photograph of manners. Edward stood, and with a soft gentleness I had raised into him, said, "I'll hold it for now, Mom. Just while we talk. You keep mixing everything up." He slid the folder toward himself and tucked it beneath his arm. He meant to look helpful. He looked like a man who had just picked up a piece of himself he couldn't name. For a second, the room tilted. The old panic, the one that knows how quickly proof can become their paper. I felt the light go thin, I could reach, I could tug, I could make a scene that would be the headline of every story they ever tell about me. I stepped back instead. At my age, I don't wrestle over evidence in front of people who clap for the wrong winner. I turned, went to my room, and zipped the suitcase. The teeth met cleanly, as if they had rehearsed. At the door, Edward said my name the way a man says Mom when he is not sure if he is still a son. I did not answer. I took my coat from the peg, slid the spare key to the house onto the table beside the cold coffee, and walked down the hall. The afternoon had turned thin and gray. On the porch, the air smelled like rain making a promise to the dust. I carried my suitcase down the steps, slow as a hymn. I reached the gate with an empty palm where the folder should have been, and didn't stop walking. The taxi driver didn't ask questions. He took the case from my hand with the quick tenderness of someone who has moved a mother before and drove with the radio low, the city sliding past like a film I'd watched too often. My phone buzzed in my purse. Edward, then Grace, then a number I didn't know. I turned it face down like a photograph you aren't ready to frame. Linda buzzed me up before I could finish the second knock. She opened the door, already crying. "I made soup," she said, which is another way to say, "I know you have been starving." The apartment smelled like onions agreeing with garlic, like a table where someone was expected. I set the suitcase by the couch and sat, suddenly heavier than my bones. "They kept the folder," I said. The words hurt my mouth. Linda's face changed in that careful way of old friends. No performance, just muscle memory of a woman who has learned where to place her strength. She went to her bedroom and came back with a flat tin from her closet shelf. Inside, wrapped in a cloth as if it were a sacrament, lay a neat stack of paper. She set it on my lap. "Open it," she said. The top page was a photocopy of the cashier's check stub. Under it, my typed summary with the ribbon skips, then the emails printed in their first, earnest font. "Soon, Mom, after the raise. Next summer." I ran my fingertip over the little break in the letter A, where the typewriter liked to falter. "I kept copies," Linda said, not looking proud, just prepared. "You came over the day you made them, remember? We laughed about the typewriter and you said, 'At my age, I don't shout, I keep receipts.' I took a second set while you were washing cups. And," she held up a small flash drive on a keychain shaped like a spoon. "My grandson scanned all of it last year, cloud and stick. I didn't tell you because I hoped we'd never need it. Sometimes the miracle is not a parted sea, but a woman with a tin." I closed my eyes. The room widened inside my chest. The loss in my palm filled back in, like a river deciding its own banks. "Thank you," I said, which was too small for what she had done. So I said it again and let her hear the weight. We ate soup at her small table, elbows almost touching. Linda listened while I told the whole story in order. The bank at 11:25, the $82,000 at the register, the planner with her leather portfolio, the word guardianship writing in on a smile. When I finished, she slid her phone across the table. A name glowed on the screen. "Ferdinand," she said. "My cousin's son. Lawyer. He handled my neighbor's deed. He's decent and doesn't like bullies dressed as helpers. I texted him while you were talking." I hesitated. The old habit of not making trouble took a breath. "Do I need a lawyer?" "You need a witness who can write," Linda said. "And a letter with teeth." The phone buzzed. A new message. "I can see you at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Bring any documents you have. We'll talk options. No charge for the first visit." I picked up the spoon-shaped drive and felt its silly weight. "I have documents," I said. "I have a friend." Linda smiled with all the quiet triumph two women are allowed to carry when nobody is watching. "You have more than that," she said. "You have a plan." I poured us both more soup and tore the bread with my hands. The phone lit again. Another number I didn't know. "Answer it," Linda said gently. "Sometimes the resource you need is on the other end of a stranger's voice." I put the call on speaker. "Mrs. Josephine?" a woman asked, professional and soft. "This is Ramona from National Bank. We flagged attempted high-dollar charges on your account and recorded a call from a third party seeking access. I wanted to confirm you are safe and offer to place a do not authorize third-party note on your profile. We can also print a list of declined transactions if you need documentation." I looked at Linda, then at the tin of copies, then at the flash drive on its spoon. "Yes, Ramona," I said, my voice steady. "Please do both." I ended the call and set the phone beside the stack of papers, 3 small lights on the table, lining up like a runway. Ferdinand's office smelled faintly of paper and lemon oil, the kind of clean that means we file things that matter. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a tie he'd tied twice that morning. Linda sat beside me, her purse on her lap like a small, loyal dog. "Tell me everything in order," Ferdinand said, and I did. The sentence through the wall, the timestamp at 11:25, the $82,000 cart, the planner with the leather smile, the word guardianship deployed like a pillow over a face. When I finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers the way people do when they're about to turn light into lines on paper. "We'll do 3 things," he said. "First, we secure your money. New account, new card, branch pickup only, do not authorize third-party note on file, and a fraud alert across the bureaus. Second, we document bank declines, the recorded call from the attempted authorization, your loan stub, your summary, the emails. Third, we communicate a neutral, factual letter to your son and his wife requesting return of any documents belonging to you and advising them to cease attempts to access your accounts. No accusations, just sunlight." "Sunlight," I repeated, as if it were a legal term. He smiled. "It is." He scanned the tin of copies on the flatbed printer, the machine humming like a patient bee. Exhibit A, the cashier's check stub. Exhibit B, the typed summary with the A that always broke. Exhibit C, the emails. Exhibit D, Ramona's note and the list of declined transactions, each one a line of math to prove a motive. Linda watched the pages stack into neatness. Ferdinand drafted the letter while we waited. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Santos," it began. Firm, cool, impersonal. "Our client, Mrs. Josephine Santos, has informed us." He used phrases that clinked like silver, without authorization, financial decision-making capacity, immediate return, preserve all communications. At the bottom, his signature curved like a final decision. "Would you like me to call your son as a courtesy?" he asked. I shook my head. "Put it in writing. Some truths should arrive wearing a stamp." He emailed the letter to Edward and Grace, copying me and Linda, attaching the exhibits with names that left no room for interpretation. Then he slid a printed copy across the desk for my hands. "You'll also receive a PDF from the bank confirming the fraud flags," he said. "Ramona's already prepared it." My phone buzzed before we reached the elevator. "Mom, what is this?" Edward texted. "A lawyer? Are you serious? You made us look like criminals." I typed back slowly. "I did not make you anything. I documented what happened. Gray dots appeared, vanished, returned." Another message. "Grace says you forged those emails to make her look bad." Ferdinand glanced at the screen and gently shook his head. "I'll request the email headers," he said. "Metadata has no patience for fiction." We ate soup at a cafe across the street, and I practiced the discipline of not replying to every storm. At 4:12 p.m., the new email arrived from Ramona. Declined transaction report attached. Do not authorize note applied. Recorded call available upon request. At 4:36, an email from Ferdinand. Cease and desist transmitted via certified mail. Tracking number attached. At 4:51, a final text from Edward. We found your folder. We'll leave it with Mr. Ernest next door by 5. You can pick it up whenever you decide to behave like family. Linda raised an eyebrow. The receipts speak, she murmured. I didn't answer. We walked home in a thin autumn light and turned onto my old street just as Mr. Ernest stepped onto his porch with a plastic grocery bag in his hand. Evening, Josephine, he called. They asked me to hold this for you, said it's important. He held the bag like a chalice, careful, both hands. I reached for it and felt the weight of paper settle into my palm, heavier than betrayal, lighter than begging. The next morning began with a pen and ended with a key. I met Ramona at the branch. She ushered me into a small glass room where the blinds clicked closed, a soft sound like agreement. We opened a new account with a number that didn't look like anything my life had ever known. 2-factor authentication. Branch pickup only. No mail to the house. She slid a safe deposit box form across the table. "For anything you don't want leaving with anyone else," she said. I placed my mother's ring, the flash drive on its silly spoon, and a sealed envelope labeled in my hand. "Originals. Do not hand to anyone but me." "Would you like cashier's checks for planned expenses?" Ramona asked. "Less exposure, more control." "Yes," I said, and asked for one more than I needed, because something inside me had begun to plan a front door. Linda waited outside with a thermos of coffee and a smile that didn't pry. We rode the bus 2 stops and turned down a street I hadn't walked in years. Mr. Benjamin met us in front of a small, well-kept building with a bench under a jacaranda tree. Purple flowers speckled the sidewalk like blessings nobody had to earn. "It's a quiet unit," he said, opening the door. "Second floor, good light, honest plumbing." We walked through rooms that felt like sentences written in my own voice. A living room with a window big enough to hold a morning. A kitchen that asked for 1 pan, 1 pot. A wooden spoon that knew my hand. A bedroom with a closet that didn't apologize for its size. The bathroom was clean, the tiles square with themselves. "How much?" I asked, and his number matched the figure I'd circled in my mind the night I blocked the card. I gave him a cashier's check for the deposit and shook his hand. Linda's eyes shone. "You didn't even look back," she whispered. "I looked forward," I said. Back at her place, we made lists with stubby pencils, utilities to call, curtains to hem, a small table to find at the flea market. I wrote a letter, too. Not a legal one, a mother's letter to her son. 1 page, measured. "I love you. I am safe. I will not fund your life. I will not live in your house. If you wish to speak, we will do so where dignity fits. A table with tea, 2 chairs, and no witnesses who cheer for control." I placed the letter in an envelope and wrote his name the way I did on lunch bags when he was 8. Then I walked to the old street alone, the folder, my folder, in my arms, and slid the letter through Edward's mail slot. I did not ring the bell. Not every conversation needs to start with a noise. On the way back, I stopped at the bank one last time and rented a second small box. Not for papers, for a key. I placed the new apartment's key inside for 1 minute and then took it out again, as if letting it absorb the habit of safekeeping. That evening, I set the kettle on Linda's stove and laid out 2 cups and saucers. She arranged the tin of copies on the table like a small museum. The clock on the microwave clicked to 6:59. Outside, the jacaranda shed another handful of flowers into the dusk. At 7, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused, unsure, then came closer. Slow, like a man learning a new walk. The kettle began to sing, and on the second note, someone knocked, not on a door that owned me, but on a door that didn't. He stood outside Linda's door like a man who had arrived at the right address and the wrong decade. I opened it and stepped aside. We didn't hug. Linda set 2 cups of tea on the table and disappeared to her room, a kindness shaped like absence. Edward took in the small apartment with a slow glance. The clean kitchen, the sofa that pulls into a bed, the tin of copies on the table like a little shrine. He sat and kept his hands flat on his thighs, the way people do when they don't trust themselves with what they might reach for. "I got your letter," he said. "I'm here alone, no Grace." "That was the condition," I said. He looked thinner, as if a month of explanations had worn grooves in him. "Mom, this is all bigger than it had to be." He exhaled. "You went to a lawyer. I went to a witness," I said. "He writes in ink." He stared at the tin, then at me. "I don't want your money," he tried. "I never did." I slid a single page across the table. Ramona's note with the bank's "Do not authorize third-party confirmation" and the call log timestamp. Below it, a line. Attempted high-dollar purchase. $82,000. Declined. I placed one finger on the time. 11:25 a.m., the minute the card died and I began living. "You told Grace I live here for free," I said quietly. "You told the bank someone needed access on my behalf. You told yourself I would not notice. Now you are telling me you never wanted what you tried to take. Which of your mouths should I listen to?" His face folded. "I was trying to keep the peace," he said, the most expensive sentence in our family. "Peace that requires theft is a costume," I said. "It tears when someone pulls a thread." He swallowed. Grace said you're confused sometimes, with paperwork. I set the typed summary down, the one with the stubborn letter A that always broke. I am precise, I said. The way poor women learn to be precise so the world doesn't price us. Read the date. He read it. His hand went to the back of his neck, his oldest nervous habit. 2 years, he whispered, as if the number had sharp edges. You are not a monster, I said. You are a man who learned a language that pays him to forget where things came from. I am reminding you. He rubbed his eyes. Grace signed deposits. I didn't know the amounts. I should have. She said your savings were dead money and I... He stopped. I let the sentence finish without me. We sat with it. The kettle clicked in the kitchen like a clock that had just remembered itself. I'm buying an apartment, I said. I've put down the deposit. The deed signs Friday. I will not be living in your house. I will not be funding your house. If you want a relationship with me, bring your respect. Leave your wallet. He nodded. Small, then larger, like a man finding a shape. I can't fix all of this in one conversation, he said. I didn't ask you to, I replied. I asked you to stop breaking it. Outside, someone laughed on the sidewalk and the sound floated up, ordinary and whole. Edward looked at the tin again, at the neat stack that had refused to disappear when it would have been convenient. Grace's parents are coming to dinner tonight, he said. She wants you there to clear the misunderstanding. Will you come? I don't attend trials where the verdict was written on the invitation, I said. But I will come by. Briefly. To say what? He asked, eyes searching my face. To bring a mirror, I said, and slid the tin an inch closer to the center of the table. Grace's parents' dining room had a chandelier that liked its own reflection. The table was set for 6, napkins folded into small swans. Grace greeted me at the door with a smile that showed every tooth and none of her gums. Josephine, she sang, air-kissing the space beside my cheek. We're so glad you could make it. Edward stood behind her, watchful. Grace's mother wore pearls, her father the careful expression of a man who funds solutions. Carla, the planner, was also there, uninvited to my mind, but seated at the far end with a leather portfolio, a fact dressed as a favor. We've all been worried, Grace began once we were seated. Such confusion over a simple family matter. We thought it best to speak openly so no one misunderstands intentions. I placed my hands in my lap. Open is good, I said. Light helps. Grace's mother nodded warmly. Exactly. We're family. We love Edward. We love you. But houses are expensive, dear. Young people struggle. Sometimes elders help. I have helped, I said. 20 years ago, with a loan. Every month since, with a pension. Every day, with labor that doesn't print a receipt. Carla cleared her throat. No one is disputing your contribution, Mrs. Santos. The goal is to protect you while enabling your son and daughter-in-law to maintain stability. A simple authorization. Ramona's timing could have been scripted by a gentler hand than fate. My phone buzzed. I placed it face up on the linen. Ramona, I said. From National Bank. On speaker, please. Grace's eyes flashed. That's not appropriate. Open, I reminded her. I answered. Ramona, we're in a family meeting. Could you summarize, without details that expose account numbers, what the bank recorded last week? Her voice filled the space with the calm of a woman who has measured her words before. Certainly, Mrs. Santos. On date, we declined a sequence of attempted charges totaling approximately $82,000 on your debit card. The card had been blocked at 11:25 a.m. Prior to that, we received a call from a third party requesting access to your account. Per your standing instruction, we denied the request and placed a "Do Not Authorize Third Party" note. Silence rearranged the room. Grace's father shifted. Carla's pen hovered. Ramona continued, professional and unbothered. We've provided documentation to your attorney. If you need the recording of the call, we can release it to law enforcement or your counsel. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. Grace laughed a brittle laugh. Anyone can make a bank nervous. That doesn't prove... I set 2 envelopes on the table, not near her, near the center, where the chandelier could see. One held Ferdinand's letter, the other, the declined transactions list. This is sunlight, I said. No accusation, only dates and amounts. The truth doesn't need adjectives. Carla reached for the letter, read the first paragraph, and leaned back slightly, as if the chair had moved. Grace's mother lifted the other page, lips tightening in that small way wives learn before they teach it to their daughters. Grace watched their faces, mirrors that didn't return what she preferred. Edward didn't touch anything. He looked at me. Grace attempted a pivot. "Mrs. Santos, surely you don't want to damage Edward's career by creating a paper trail. Companies Google things these days. You should think of him." "I am," I said. "Paper keeps men from telling their mothers they imagine the cost." Her father cleared his throat. "Grace," he said, the warning dressed as her name. "I will not be portrayed as a thief," she snapped, then softer. "I was trying to improve our home." "And you were willing to pay for it with mine," I replied. The pearls at Grace's mother's throat clicked softly as she turned to her daughter. "You told us she refused to help with food," she said. "This says she pays you her pension." Grace's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. Carla closed her portfolio. "I can't advise further tonight," she said carefully. "We'll need to pause any planning until this is resolved." In the space that followed, I stood. "I came to bring a mirror," I said. "If you don't like the reflection, that belongs to you." I slid a third envelope toward Edward, the one I'd addressed earlier with his name in my lunch bag handwriting. "This is for you. Tea, 2 chairs, no witnesses. If you want to speak as a son to a mother, you know where to find me." I turned to go. Grace's father rose, old-world polite, and moved aside. The chandelier made tiny stars on the wall, each one a small, indifferent truth. At the door, Edward said my name. Not a plea this time, just a calling in the right language. I placed my hand on the doorknob and felt, beneath my palm, the weight of a house that no longer knew my name. I did not attend their aftermath, but news travels along the quiet wires of a neighborhood. Mr. Ernest told Linda, and Linda told me with the gentleness you use to pour hot tea. After I left that chandeliered room, the swans of folded napkins sagged. Carla excused herself first, portfolio clasped, saying words like liability and pause and conflict of interest. Grace's mother folded the declined transactions list back into its envelope the way you return a dress that doesn't fit and said, "This is not what you told us." Her father placed his hand over his wallet and left it there, which is the oldest sermon in the world. The next morning, the store called about those deposits. Non-refundable if not paid by close of business. Edward didn't have the money. Grace didn't either. The saleswoman's voice, recorded by the kindness of policy, said, "We'll be canceling the order." The couch never arrived to be sat on by the people who believed it would save them. By afternoon, Edward texted me, "I've canceled all authorizations. I'm removing Grace from my card." Then another, "I'm sorry for the dinner." Then a third that tagged its own truth. "I don't know how to be a husband who isn't a son to the loudest person in the room." Grace tried the old route, stories dressed as concern. She called my church friend to say I was slipping, then called the pharmacy to ask about confusion. Ramona rang me immediately, voice calm as a stopped clock. "We've documented the calls," she said. "Would you like a copy?" I said yes. Paper keeps rumors from learning to walk. That week, Edward slept on his office couch twice, a sentence I didn't read with joy. Poetic justice is not a party. It is a room where echoes finally hear themselves. On Thursday, he stood on Linda's stoop with a manila envelope and eyes that had learned to be quiet. Inside the envelope, the folder they'd kept, returned uncreased. A handwritten note. "I can't pay the $50,000 today. I can pay $500 a month. If you won't take it, I'll put it in an account with your name until I can." He had attached a simple repayment schedule from Ferdinand's template, signed. The signature shook. The math did not. I took a breath. This was the loss Grace never believed in, the loss of narrative control. She tried, of course, to reframe. Sent a message to a family group chat I'd been added to without consent. "Josephine refuses to help us in our time of need." Linda forwarded me my own reply, crafted and saved for days like this. "I helped for 20 years. I am helping now by not teaching my son that taking is helping." On Friday at 10, I signed the deed. Ferdinand slid the papers across like fresh linen. "Mr. Eiching." Benjamin handed me the keys, 3 metal shapes that had trained all their lives to become mine. I held them, and something inside me settled into its original shape. Grace texted at noon, "You've ruined my life." I typed back, "I released mine." She replied with a photo of a receipt for a storage unit. Cancelled, deposit lost. Consequence is not revenge. It is simply a door choosing its rightful hinge. That evening, Edward called. "We're separating finances," he said. "Maybe more. I don't know." His voice was smaller, but not broken, like a man stepping into shoes that weren't bought on credit. "If you don't want the monthly payments, I'll send them to Ferdinand's trust account." "Send them," I said. "Not because I need the money, because you need the line that separates debt from love." Outside my new building, jacaranda blossoms freckled the sidewalk purple as truth. I stood beneath the tree and listened to nothing needing me. I climbed the stairs, one slow, certain step at a time, keys in my hand. I put the first key in the lock, turned it, and heard the gentle click of a life choosing me back. The apartment greeted me with the cool, blank welcome of a page. Saturday morning, Linda arrived with a box labeled Kitchen Joy. Inside, 2 mugs, a wooden spoon, a small pot that had already decided to be my favorite. Antonia came with her truck and 3 plants who knew how to forgive beginners. We opened windows. We let light learn the floor. I placed my mother's ring in a tiny dish by the sink. I folded towels into a neat stack inside the single closet that didn't apologize for existing. On the sill, I lined up 3 objects that felt true enough to keep: the spoon-shaped flash drive, the spare key to Linda's place, and a photo of a young boy with cake on his face. We named this shelf Sanctuary without saying it out loud. At noon, Ramona stopped by on her lunch break, hair tucked, smile soft. She handed me a sealed envelope. "Final confirmations, Mrs. Santos. Account secured, fraud alerts active, safe deposit inventory notarized." I offered her tea. She took a cup and stood by the window. "My grandmother bought her place at 70, she said. She said the walls learned her name faster than people did." When she left, she hugged me in that brief professional way women do when they are not supposed to be part of the story, but somehow are. I wrote the first rule on a card and taped it inside the cupboard. "No money leaves here without my hand on it." I wrote the second on another card and slid it in the drawer with the cutlery. "No one enters here who makes the air smaller." The third I kept in my pocket. "I will not apologize for choosing myself." Edward texted at 3, a screenshot of the first $500 transfer to Ferdinand's trust. "It's a start," he wrote. Then, "May I visit Sunday at 2? No Grace, just me." I set the phone down beside the wooden spoon and let the question breathe. "Yes," I typed, and added the boundary that would keep the visit from becoming a rerun. 30 minutes. Tea. No talk about money. Only respect. Linda and I went to the flea market and found a small round table with a scar across its surface like a healed truth. We buffed it with lemon oil until the wood remembered it was a tree. We set it by the window with 2 chairs, no more, no less, and I understood what a boundary looks like when it becomes furniture. That night, I slept without the river of listening that used to run through the dark, waiting for footsteps, for doors, for the small demands that nibble a woman's edges. Morning arrived like an apology I didn't need. I made coffee in my little pot, and the kitchen smelled like a future. At 1:55, I placed 2 cups on the scarred round table. At 1:57, I opened the window an inch, enough to invite in the city's ordinary noises. At 1:59, someone tested the new doorbell, and I heard my own voice say, "Coming," without the note of service that used to live in it. I opened the door to my son, thinner, quieter, eyes less busy. He looked past me into the room that fit me on purpose. "It's beautiful," he said. "It looks like you." "It is," I answered, and stepped aside, but only far enough to let respect walk in with him. He stood at the threshold, removed his shoes without being asked, and in that small unlearning, I felt a larger door begin to open. Sunday at 2, my son stood barefoot just inside my door, holding his hands like a man who had finally learned that empty can mean open. I poured tea into 2 mugs Linda had labeled for good news and good tries. We sat at the round table with the scar that remembered becoming whole. He looked at the wall where I'd placed 3 small things: the spoon-shaped flash drive, the spare key to Linda's place, and a photo of a boy with cake across his cheeks, and no idea how hard a world can be on a woman who loves him. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Silence, used right, is a teacher that doesn't show off. "I've started therapy," Edward said, voice plain as bread. "They asked me who I am when I'm not paying for peace." He smiled without brightness. I didn't have an answer. "I'm trying to make one." "I hope it's an answer you can afford," I said, and meant the kind of cost money doesn't measure. He nodded toward the window. "Grace and we've separated finances. We may separate more." He didn't say her name like a battlefield. He said it like a weather report he'd finally looked up. "I sent the first $500 to Ferdinand. I'll send the next on the 1st of every month. No reminders needed." "Good," I said, and took a small sip of tea that tasted like the inside of a door closing softly. He glanced at the kitchen, at my mother's ring by the sink, at the stove that knew my hands. "You did this," he said. "You started over. At 69. "I started exactly when I could," I answered. "And earlier would not have been kinder. It would only have been different." He breathed out and reached into his pocket. A small envelope, my name in his handwriting this time. "For you," he said. Inside lay a note, not a defense, not a plea. "I know I am in debt. I won't pay you with explanations." Beneath it, a key, not to his house, to a storage unit under his name where he'd placed the couch that never arrived, the television that had been a plan, all the almosts that used to demand my savings wear their shape. "I'm selling them to pay you back," the note finished. "I won't ask you to attend the auction of what I thought made me a man." I set the key on the table. "You don't owe me furniture," I said. "You owe me a son." His eyes glossed, then cleared. He looked down at his feet, at the rug where he'd left his shoes by instinct and respect. We spoke of smaller things then, the jacaranda, the neighbor who hums while watering plants, a recipe for soup Ramona had asked me to write down. 30 minutes passed without any need to perform the past. When he stood to leave, he carried only his empty mug and his full silence. At the door, he paused. "Do I get a spare?" he asked, nodding toward the ring in my hand. "One day," I said, "when the key means visit, not access." He smiled like a man grateful for a boundary that holds. "I'll earn it," he said, and slipped his shoes back on without a sound. After he left, I washed the cups and wiped the table, circling the scar with the cloth the way a woman blesses a thing without calling it prayer. I took my folder from the shelf and slid the latest confirmations inside, the way a sea keeps one more wave without becoming impressed with itself. Then I walked to the window, looked at the park, and let the city move without me needing to chase it. I opened the safe tin, lifted the spoon-shaped drive, and tucked it back beneath the papers. I touched my mother's ring, then the spare key to Linda's, then the photo of the boy who taught me how to pack lunches and, later, how to pack a life. On my cupboard door, the card with my first rule waited, words still true enough to stand on. I took the key to my apartment from my pocket and placed it in my palm. It lay there, warm from me. "I don't scream anymore," I said into the room that knew my name. "I document." Outside, the jacaranda let go of 3 purple petals. They fell without hurry and landed exactly where they belonged. My peace is louder than their excuses. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.